All right, I'm gonna call roll. Who's taking?
Turn it on.
Who are we missing?
Just
She's not gonna be here. Lisa not here.
I'm right.
No, she originally had said no, because there's some appointments that she had, so, but she wasn't for sure, but it's.
All right. You doing roll in, Betsy?
I just know that all board members are in attendance with the exception of Lisa Whitesell.
All right. And then I need a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Moving on, communication. Anybody got, anything they want to address the school board on any agenda item? Any visitors? Nope. Very good. We're going to move on to new business. We have SIP. Got all our wonderful principals here tonight, so who gets to start?
Lots of different steps.
Yeah, no, we do, and I'd like to thank everybody in attendance as well as one of our future Eagle Scouts right there, so I just had to get the direction in an intentional way.
Yeah.
But I want to thank everybody. What you'll see tonight is our school improvement plans. More so, you're going to see the principals have put together a PowerPoint, which I know you have access to. They'll go through some very specific information, and then there's detailed information embedded within their plans. And so, these are living, breathing documents. I think you're going to see that what we do as a district in regards to our professional development is also embedded within these. So we look forward to the opportunity to share the information.
Well, we want to thank you though for the opportunity to have the presentation, and not even a presentation, but have it in this manner. Several years ago, we started doing a roundtable, and it's just something that we all value very much, the collaboration, the discussion that we have all together, and being able to have a conversation about the plans and opportunity for that dialogue as the evening goes on. We appreciate that very much.
As every planning should, go ahead, Betsy, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I'm actually taking notes, so.
Scroll, please. Thank you, Vanna.
Amy, can you scroll for me?
Absolutely. As any plan should be, we utilize the backwards design, meaning we start with the ultimate goals, the ultimate vision, which is what our district has set, and the district developing and maintaining rigorous programs that challenge students, individual abilities, promote academic, emotional, and extracurricular growth in preparation for their life journey. I think for this year, what you are going to see, a common word in our SIP plans would be rigorous programs. We work to challenge every student, of course at their individual abilities, making sure that it is rigorous enough that they become the independent learners for life. And we talk about that, you're going to see in each of our plans, based on data, of course, you can take a look at our data, and we make plans based on that, making sure that all of our students are challenged academically, but also in the social emotional aspect, making sure that we are supporting them where necessary, but also stretching them where it needs to be. Extracurricular growth, of course, that was one of the main points that we kind of talked about when we were actually creating this vision, if you guys remember that extracurricular growth does play a large part in who many of our students are, and that's obviously not just sports, but starting at a young age, it also adds towards their academic and social emotional growth. So you'll notice these words embedded in each of our SIP plans and created with data and interwoven.
So although there is no test that fully captures the skills and abilities of the great teaching that we have going on and that we have the privilege to see daily in our buildings, it is a measure of progress that helps us track what we need to do next. We have state and local data available to us, indicators that gives teachers information to support the improvements and the differentiation that takes place in the instruction. At grades 3 through 8, we continue to give and value the information we receive with the reading and math data. And across the district, we also add to our reading assessments. We have fluency and comprehension checks. our kindergarten, first and second grade teachers individually give the DRA test, Developmental Reading Assessment. And to help us track our behavior data, we have the SWIS that grades K through 12, and that's school-wide information system, so we can track and guide needs of that social-emotional, with PBIS data being entered, with discipline, and ACT testing, AP testing. And then, of course, with the state testing with PARC at grades 3 through 9, the state sometimes refers or talks to us as if we would think about that as being a GPS system. And although we are recently receiving information that we will study even further to look more deeply into those assessments, we know it's testing critical thinking, it's testing real-world problems. We celebrate the success that we see through that testing, but we also know it's aligned to very high standards with the Illinois Learning Standards, which we have our curriculum aligned to. And the results of this test also provides us with further information to guide those needs and differentiation. And it's a continuum of mastery. We can't just look at what third grade does. It's going to take several years of looking at that, comparing it with our own local assessment, and designing curriculum to match those needs.
So ever since I've been paying attention, we continue to switch tests. And the conspiracy theorists, of course, will tell you that it's done on purpose so that we can't track our schools. And I grew up in Iowa, and the Iowa tests the basic skills, which all kinds of private entities nationwide use because it's such a good test. It's been in effect since 1937. So I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with MAP, I'm struggling with PARC, I'm struggling with moving around. Why don't we pick something? And do you need us to go to Chicago and have something for the delegates to vote on in Illinois? I mean, what is the problem?
You know, that, I mean.
I'm looking at you, it's just kind of a.
Well, as we were putting this together too, we kind of felt that pain as well, as far as we really couldn't compare our first year with PARC to last year with PARC, because they were not only different tests, but they were reported differently to us. And so that was very difficult, and it was a different test. So, you know, once again, we're saying, you know, 2 years ago, we said it was a baseline. So this year, again, we're saying it's a baseline. But we can, you know, glean some things from that, knowing where our strengths are, where some ideas of where we need to help our students, especially learning how to take an assessment on an electronic device.
And that's
you know?
just it. When they become more familiar with the technology, we're going to see improvements. When we have the continuing of the instruction with the Illinois Learning Standards presented to the children as they go through the grade levels, we're going to see improvements. The one thing that's important to note is we don't just look at this snapshot. We look at it, triangulate it, look at it all very carefully. We do see a lot of alignment with the MAP and the PARC. May not be exact percent, 4%, but we really could study how our students did with MAP, and how they do with math PARC, and see some similarities. Because they're both tests that pull from our learning standards.
So I guess my question is who's telling us that we have to use PARC? And how, why is Iowa using something that, and they're number one in the nation?
I have a question that may
Fact.
clarify what he's saying. Out of all of these tests, there's only 2 that we're required to give. And those are required to give by the state. And it's state determined. Each state gets to decide their own. MAP, Ames Web, DRA, and the Swiss are individual to our district. And there is a definite advantage to those. Would you speak to what that advantage to
Really,
have those tests?
It is that local data.
Multiple times a year.
Multiple times, or 3 times a year, that we give as, when you look up here, with the exception of the last 2 on the list. Swiss is ongoing, it's our social emotional, and gives us our pulse of how our students are doing. But the top 3, we give that 3 times a year, so we're truly able to continue.
And we get the
and plus-
data right away. Right
Yes.
after we get it,
And we've
which
been
is
using
important.
those for years?
Yes.
And being nationally normed is much more important information to us than a park data that is our baseline. I mean, of course, we have to examine it, as Kim says, but when something is nationally normed, that means it has some backbone to it.
Like and Ames Web, yeah.
Well, and the Iowa Basic Skills Test you're talking about is an achievement test. And we used to give an achievement test, the Metropolitan Achievement Test, and then we moved to something else. I can't remember what it was.
But honestly,
But that was an achievement test that we as a district could choose to do, as districts could choose to do Iowa Basic Skills.
and if we would choose the Iowa test, whatever test you want to pick, the California, the Iowa, it's another week of testing for children. And we definitely value the top, the top 4 there, the high school, the ACT.
So I'm probably
And
talking
that's-
about replacing the bottom 2 with some.
Well, the
ACT is
ACT already switched to SAT, right? So that one's already, will be different next year.
We'll still have
I'd just
date,
rather
we
drive
can
our
take-
bus and let somebody else drive it for us. And it sounds like this is more for us to solve. than-
Well, and the way, to your, talking about that, those of us who have been in the field for a while, you used to have the IGAP, and then you had the ISAT, and then you had PARC, and then PARC's changed 3 times. That's not to excuse it, because we are a data-rich society. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's really getting that data and looking at your subgroups, being able to track students. No Child Left Behind, for as much as people gave it a hard time, including myself, it did do one thing, and it did cause educators to not leave any children behind. You can go to schools nowadays and they can talk to you pretty much about every student they have on their caseload. The problem with some of the assessments that we're having are the inconsistencies. And it's not a blame game, because quite frankly, when we look at, let's say, PARC, and the key for us is to take emotion out of the data. Numbers are numbers, and whether it's PARC or ISET or whatever it is, it gives us an opportunity, I think more so, to see the rigor and challenge within our curriculum. And things like professional development play certainly a role. Our value, we have a tremendous amount of value in our instructional coaches, which is significantly reduced from where we were. So there are some variables that contribute to all of that. And again, never to excuse, when you see data drop, everybody in this room gets concerned with that and want to do what we can. That's why, from my perspective, and I think the goal and objective should be for any school district, is to really delve into your curriculum to make sure that regardless of the assessment that you're given, your curriculum supersedes those expectations to begin with. One of the issues I know that does play a role, it's played havoc in some other districts, is having to deal with whether paper, pencil, or technology. And that has played some role. What I'm hoping is, to your point, is that whatever they select, let's stick with it. Because that's
So who's they?
the state of Illinois.
Isn't it
Is it the Board of Ed? It is, it is. It is.
Is it the Board of Education?
The
Yeah,
Illinois
it is
State
the-
Board of Ed, it is.
Do we have a
So,
lobby that has any effect on them?
It does a little bit. You're seeing more so, it's
called Pearson.
political alignment that more so drives a lot of this. And quite frankly, of the, I believe, don't quote me on the number, but there are very few states that require the PARC assessment. That Illinois would be the last to withdraw from the PARC assessment.
How many are still in, Jim?
I think 7.
7. And that being said,
Massachusetts.
and there is a financial component, there was a huge investment in this assessment. I believe there's 3 years left on the contract. I do believe that at that time, you again will see something else. That's why I think the more we delve into really focusing on that local assessment that's nationally normed is going to be probably the best barometer. But it doesn't matter, because no matter what test we take, you know what, we should, it's data, and it's going to identify some things for us. So I hope I hope that answers a little bit, but there are some constraints that we have due to what we're required to do.
So I really like what I heard because I'm just, the bureaucrats at ISB, and that's what they are. At least we can be true to what we think are really important skills, like writing.
Absolutely.
And, if ISB decides to drop writing from ISAT, like,
That's a big issue because
right?
the data, they do, and it's unfortunate because those, again, that really understand the research behind writing and cognitive development, I mean, the actual physical process of writing and the connection to the gray matter in regards to creative and is significant, and yet many of these students are not. Now, I'm hoping, and I've talked to legislators, I think, if we're going to not allow them to possess a writing implement, I'm all for it. I think technology absolutely is the future. Who's not going to agree with that? But it would be much better if we could facilitate that with a tablet and have them be able to continue to use technology, so be able to write on a
Because
tablet.
that was the hardest thing to watch the third and fourth graders do.
It was challenging.
When they had to, when we were doing makeup testing, they had their open, and then you saw how long they were, you're checking to make sure what's happened, and you could see they're trying to write something. And if they had their pen, they would have been busy. They would have been busy. But now they're trying to figure out, how do I do it? Because we're only third graders with keyboard.
Now, and I don't want to dominate this conversation, but I do want to, part of the issue behind that is school districts do approach things differently. So we could have 5 schools that say, we are going to all have our students respond electronically. Now, you could have 2 of those schools say, listen, on every practice test, every day, we are going to have these students use our technology to produce these results. And that's all they do. And I've been associated and affiliated with a program like that. So the students are so focused on responding electronically that they're not really engaged here. But when it comes time to take that test, they're very comfortable and they begin writing away. As opposed to a school that might not take it seriously, but don't have them write as much electronically, and that would be the difference in a score that one school could produce as opposed to another. So there are a lot of variables that I think have a significant impact that we need to just pay attention to. So.
Excuse me, but wasn't it painful, Kim, to watch these kids?
Susan, the teachers, hearing the teachers during that week, the 3rd and 4th grade teachers especially, to talk about what they saw the kids doing all year long, and then what they were able to do because they were so worried about spelling and finding the words that they didn't have that time for that to just flow and keep going.
It was assessing their ability to type
Yes.
versus their ability to write.
Yes.
Even high school kids struggle with some,
Yes.
just a different format.
Don't we have technology where they can write and then it translates to text?
Not on that
Not
assessment.
unless you have a major combination required.
Not on that assessment. That's why to your point, you need to influence those types of changes.
Just sitting back here and listening to this, first of all, I get the cognitive thing, but looking farther down the road, what happens the day that we have an EMP go off, and you guys may know what that is, you may not, it knocks out all these computers, and now our kids don't know how to write, how are they going to communicate? They need to be able to do both things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's just a matter of when, that's why I think it's important that, and we've had these conversations, it's controlling our own destiny, and that is, I don't mean that to sound like but it's us making sure that the rigor and the challenge contained in our curriculum is above that of the assessments that we take, so when we do take any assessment, we do well. Because you will find a lot of commonality in regards to outcomes for assessment, whether it be local or, national norm, state norm, whatever the case might be.
Well, I know, I'm a pretty good typist. I mean, I couldn't type in third grade. I mean,
Well,
I know, I mean, I think it's a really big problem that you need to think about.
Well, and we're at a transitional stage right now too, because quite frankly, throw this out there, you know what? Forget this. Let the
Yeah.
kids tell me, I mean, honestly, it might not be what's comfortable for me, and I could look at this and say, no way, but these kids are being brought up now to where they all have some form of digital technology on their person and are more comfortable thumbing a response or a message than they are typing on a computer.
Hey, Brandon has really IT savvy kids. Do you have a third grader yet?
I'm a fourth grader.
Okay,
I'm a second grader.
okay, so,
And a 4-year-old who types pretty good with their thumbs.
okay.
She's not spelling anything right.
Oh, so, I mean, what's your take? Your fourth grader's good at typing on a keyboard?
Not that great.
Good
And
at,
that, I mean, that's concentrating on typing versus just letting it flow. That's a huge thing for all of them. So,
Well, there's a lot of research to support that. I mean, I'm not one to where you don't correct spelling or anything like that. I think
Well,
punctuation and vocabulary, all that's very important, but you do need to allow the students to be able to put it out on paper and be creative, then go back and make sure things are done properly.
And it's more than just typing, we have to spend a lot of time teaching our kids how to drag, how to drop, I mean, there's so many things on this test that they have to do to enter it and navigate. It's not necessarily.
Or if you go into a classroom, there's 25 students and you have 25 tablets and all of a sudden 22 of them work. You know, that creates a problem because now what do you do? And that disruption in that classroom environment is a problem because now you have to accommodate this student who has to have some additional time or makeup. So those are things that are characteristic of many testing environments, and it's getting less and less. It is, but it's something we still have to contend with.
Are we involved in our students? Are they able to give any feedback on, input on anything that, any of this testing? Because
There are surveys at the end,
Yeah,
and
surveys.
most of them are pretty honest.
we're looking at it from our vantage point, and they're growing up in a whole different world. I mean, obviously, but I'd just be interested to know where they're thinking all this is.
I can only speak for mine, but mine are exhausted by the end of it. They just feel like there's so much time spent on the test that it just wears them out. And they want to do
You
well.
can see that in Park, the
Yes.
first year especially.
It was just,
You know, we brought kids into the annex. Some of them came in 6 different times. And from day 1, watch them walk into day 6. You just tell them their face and they're walking in, they're defeated already. It's just, I gotta sit here and I gotta type out another.
But they'll spend hours in front of these games and tablets and stuff outside of school, and they don't seem to get wore out.
It's,
No,
So it's the testing.
isn't
all
it
have to.
different?
different level of
Yes.
engagement.
Yeah,
and stress, there's a lot of test
Oh,
anxiety.
very
I think that is underestimated, how many of our kids.
You're exactly right.
Experience high test anxiety because they are pleasers, they want to do well, and this stress, so they're unable to perform.
Well, you talked about that too, like the feedback with kids, where math, we've had kids come to their teachers and say, I'll just use Crystal Day, Mrs. Day, I really didn't do my best. Can I take that again? And we have the ability then to let them retest, or if a child was sick, or, you know, those sorts of things. And so they do advocate, they do reflect more, and they have that opportunity.
And they're able to set goals for themselves with that local data, because it is instantaneous and it is 3 times a year. And that's exactly what happens is our students say, I set a goal for myself. I was at 241 and I wanted to be at 243. Can I please take this again? I don't really know what happened or whatever.
Or you've got the kid who pushes the same button over and over again, and you can say,
Oh, no, that.
you know what, I think you'll do that over again.
Because it also timestamps how long it took them.
You're right. And then we say, go ahead and try again.
Yeah, go ahead and try.
And I don't want to get a lot into educational theory and all that as you'll go to sleep. But we also are transitioning societally in regards to our expectations. As you heard me say before, you know, failure has to be an option. you know, many of these kids are growing up to where they don't feel that they, you know, grading is important, absolutely. But can you imagine if we were to send home no grades? However, a lot of the stress level that kids are feeling are to take that A. They've got to take that A home. We have students who decline to take honors level courses because of their fear of getting a B or a C. How tragic is that? As opposed to, you know, saying, yes, we want to inspire you to be better. We want you to take educational risks. We want you to do your best. And a lot of times in assessment type kind of environments where you have some of your higher level, higher achieving students, the fear of failure creates some of that anxiety and it becomes problematic. So there's no swift answer, but that being said, at the end of the day, they're taking these assessments and it is providing us data and we have to respond to it.
But I gotta say, as a parent, though, that pendulum swings two ways, because if you don't have expectations.
Didn't say expectations. No, I agree.
If you don't set a bar somewhere, they're not getting to that bar either.
Set a bar, absolutely. Trust me, my kids will tell you, absolutely set a bar. I'm just talking about what, over a period of time, would instill, especially in households, which I can guarantee everyone sitting around this table and in this room has extremely high expectations of their students, and they should, absolutely. But understand some of that stress is overwhelming to some of our students. But we think, right now, how many of us have students? I know I do. I'm just going to share an example briefly, but I have a student who was #1 in her class out of 708 students in high school. Test her overnight, she got a 26 on the ACT. I'm not saying it's terrible, but she couldn't do it well. There's nothing that was there to assess her work ethic and ability. On the other end, I have a student of 34 and she learns through osmosis and she takes tests. Both had extremely high levels of achievement and expectations. But that's why you go back to, we can't use one test as a barometer. But I agree with you. High expectations, absolutely.
It sounds like this is bigger picture, so this is for ISB. So it's really not an argument or debate with you folks.
No, you're right.
But big picture, what can we do? Like, I know, I got a niece up in Dubuque that she just finished her junior year in high school and she's going to college. Like, they're kicking her out, she's got everything done. And she was telling me we had 9 valedictorians last year. Huh? And she explained that there's a level, if you have a 4.5 out of 5 or whatever, you've hit the standard of AP or whatever they call it, and you're a valedictorian. She said we'll probably have about 13 of them this year. So because she said what was happening was kids start cheating on tests, there's all this pressure to be #1 or #10 or whatever. She said I don't know, the more I thought about it, it sounded socialist at the beginning, but the more you think about it, you're like, why bring in all the politics of I sucked up to the teacher more than Greg, because we both had a 4.999, and it boiled down to who was.
There are more and more high schools abandoning grade point average.
They are.
Going to the cum laude system, something like that.
And I'm cool with grade points, the class rank, I guess,
And the rank.
the more I thought about it, this is ridiculous.
Well, and you know what, because it begs the argument, you've heard this before. Do you want the surgeon that scored the highest in the class to work on you, or the one that scored at the bottom but made the cut, I know what I want cutting on me, but I'm just saying.
The one that's never been sued.
You never know, that guy at the bottom of the class might have better hands.
That's right. But he was still a 4.5.
Well, I'm assuming that they do some assessment on the actual.
They let them all be doctors, don't they?
So are those things we can decide in this room though, or is that bigger than us?
Decide in regards to.
Like you're saying, lot or class rank?
We can decide that, yeah, that's a district decision.
Absolutely, we can decide that. And I had a very interesting point one time brought to me. We at a school, and we were doing honors night. And and to your point, it depends where you fall on this. Are you saying you want to recognize, though, that have the highest achievement in regards to the highest standards you have, which is wonderful, but we had special education students who were a part of our honors program, and there were some people that objected to it. And so as we were talking about this was new to me because, quite frankly, to that point, I'd only been involved in honors programs that, quite frankly, were exclusionary when you look at it. And the representative who was conducting the honors program that night said to me, the reason that we changed this was because we have some of our best performers and our highest achieving students in regards to their capacity to learn that work as hard or harder than our number one student, and why should they not be recognized for all that they've done in regards to the work that they've had presented before them. And I sat back and I said, makes sense. I said, yeah, paradigm shift, boom. You know, I got that. I understood, of course, challenge and all that for any student at any time. But to that point, and part of this discussion is, it removed that barrier of that special needs student who had learning disabilities to aspire to be a part of this honors program and achieve an extremely high level. So, you know, it depends where you lie, and it helps in creating your philosophy of what our standard is and what it means to all students.
Doug, there's a clarification that I'm not sure of. We say ISBE does park, but isn't it our state legislature that says you will do park and ISBA?
Oh, we are required because it's tied to school funding.
So it is the state legislatures?
Yes.
So that's where we would start in our...
We're not, we can't say we're not going to do it.
Is where I was going with it.
Oh, would ISBE lobby them?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, what if our ideas are different than ISB's?
It's not
Well,
for
we've
here.
had some teachers who have been on the, creating the standards for social studies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yao, was it?
Yeah,
Corey Yao, who ISBE had her on a panel to review the standards. So there is local input. But ISBE decides how they're going to implement what the legislature says we have to do.
Yes.
So that's where we'd start
Yes,
to
and you're
knock them on the
absolutely
head.
right.
Yeah,
That's why when you hear things about contact your local legislators,
that's why.
it's not just a catchphrase.
If I can piggyback onto that, and we take a look at the successes, that's one of the things we were gonna bring up. First of all, our district is huge, as you know, but the really awesome thing is that each building, they're not working in a silo. Everybody works together, and we are so appreciative of instructional coaches, Amy Sutton and Corey Yao is the other one, that we are now not just looking at grade 7, 8 GMS, this is how we're going to do social studies. The teachers are working with the GIS teachers and the GHS teachers. And so we're looking at alignment vertically. And that's not just in social studies, but that's happening in science and in math and in language arts. And going back to the whole social studies alignment, we've had to have a paradigm shift. I was a social studies teacher for over 20 years. I absolutely love the subject. I love getting up and telling the kids stories. But it shouldn't be about me as the teacher just disseminating information. Instead now, social studies is inquiry based. And so we give a question out to the kids, maybe it's gonna revolve around conflict. And the kids are gonna take that and they're gonna delve into what is really interesting to them, and it's really making their learning come alive to them. And it's very exciting to see, and they have the collaboration going on in the classrooms. Again, this is a paradigm shift because a lot of times I was a very lecture-based teacher, but this is a change that's happening within the curriculum that then impacts and will help overall our PARCC scores and our MAP scores and so forth. Same is true in science. The great thing with math, as you know, Tracy Kimball, man, she can talk the talk, but the amazing things that are happening in the math classes with the curriculum and the way it's being taught. All of this, we've been doing just in the last couple of years, and it's going to have an impact on our kids. The other thing is, we've got new health standards, and so the PE teachers, PE and health teachers have been working together on that. And so we're just getting a full alignment here. We are very appreciative of the professional development that is going on. We very much have the belief that you send a couple of teachers and then they come back and they do the training. So for example, Jen found, or maybe it was Amy, a conference on writing to read. We didn't just send language arts teachers, we sent social studies teachers and science teachers, because they are going to be using that not just in the language arts classes, but across the curriculum. And so if we see in our MAP scores, gosh, we're not doing very well in vocabulary. Well, what can you do in social studies to help with that? What can you do in science to help with that? If we're seeing we've got some low scores when it comes to analysis, okay, how can we support each other in the various subjects to help the kids overall? So it's not just based on one subject, everybody's working together. We have the response to intervention that's been going on for some time, and basically that's providing reading support and math support. We also have what we call the student success teams, and this is where we rally around particular students, we celebrate their successes, but we really dig deep into how they're doing on the map, and or their MComp and MCAP, and we try to create a plan to help that student become even more successful. And so like the student successful teams, they meet once a month with the counselors, with the social worker, with the psych. Everybody works together to try to see what we can do to help that student be successful. So I got the fun slide. I got to share all the successes. So I just think it's a really exciting time to be in education.
Is the SST like the middle school concept, but in all
Well,
levels?
not exactly. Who would like to answer how elementary chooses to do the student success team?
It used to be called the problem-solving team, and it's a team of varied, talented people, teachers, psychologists, social workers, anybody who might have ideas to offer a teacher to support a student. So a teacher would come that has a student in her classroom who has been identified as being at risk, and then would sit down at the table and they talk about what does the student do well, celebrate those successes and try to build on them to help them with the things they're struggling with. And so you get so many wonderful ideas from interventionists, from the social worker, and then a plan is developed to provide interventions for that student to help them with their...
Who brings the student to that team?
There's a process for that, but definitely the interventionists within our buildings are a part of that, helping the teachers to identify. They come up with ideas well before they come to the team, so they are trying things in their classroom, and when they get to a point where they feel they've exhausted their talents, then they reach out and bring them to the...
About how many kids would you say in each school, or roughly?
Well, we meet once a month, and I would say we generally have, in the elementary, 6 to 8 students a month that we're discussing.
6 to 8 different students each month, or?
Sometimes we might repeat a student if the interventions aren't working, because we touch base to see how things are going.
That's good.
And with us, it'd be 12 at the 7th grade, 12 at the 8th grade. And so, for example, we might say this particular student really needs to form a connection with an adult. And so they'll do something that's called check-in, check-out. And so each morning they'll meet with a particular teacher. The teacher will just talk in general about, hey, what'd you have for dinner last night? That type of thing. Let's see what you've got going on in your classes today. And then at the end of the day, they meet with that same adult as kind of a check-in. And throughout the day, for example, it might be a little bit different at the elementary level, but say I'm the student, I meet with you in the morning, I go to my first hour teacher, at the end of the hour, she takes a look at my check-in, check-out information, and we might need to chat. So for example, I noticed you didn't complete all of your homework last night, what can you tell me about that? So it's just, a lot of it has to do with forming relationships with the students. But then again, if that student needs even more, then we might say that student needs to meet once a week for 30 minutes with a social worker. So it depends on the situation with the student and what that student might need.
Are the students, could an IEP student?
Yes.
Be in that too?
As well as your most talented honor student.
Does it complicate things too much to do this, or would there be a way for us to get the community more involved in something like that? For, say, the thing that clicked with me is the student needs contact with an adult.
Well, I will say, I love that idea. Something I know that Jen might want to speak to. I think it was Jen that came up with the idea of kind of a peer mentoring, so that students are being placed with other students that they can look up to, kid to kid, and that's getting started within the next month or so.
The other layer to that is most of our elementaries have it in place. I'm not sure where we're at with GIS, but we wrap. As far as PBIS, when we bring the wrap around, where we bring the community into the table and really we're hitting the child and the family from all directions. Home, school, community, everything.
Awesome.
So we do get to that point with certain students.
And how many students would you say fall into that?
Maybe only 2 a building, 2 or 3.
It's very intensive.
It's really intensive to do it.
But I think, to your point, you have seen school districts, and I think you more so see this in a more metropolitan city-type environment, inner-city-type environment, where you see, and we're seeing more and more students who are being raised with extended family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, brothers, sisters, and bringing grandparents or adults who, let's say, are retired and wish to donate their time to schools, to come in and act as kind of a mentor, big brother. Of course, they're vetted and background checks and all that kind of stuff. But to your point, sometimes it's just doing all that we can to get another adult into a child's life, because many of them are going home to environments that don't have that. So that's something we continue to look at.
We had success at Glenwood Elementary last year because of the proximity to the high school, that with some students who just really needed a connection, we were able, and it happened through the SST team, identify that they needed some type of good role model, whether they're reading with them or math or just talking and going out to recess. So we would bring over someone from the high school. And that we had a lot of success with that.
That's typically your child is acting out or something?
Not necessarily. At one time, it was a child who never spoke, who just would sit in the class and just kind of be very inward, wasn't returning homework, just wasn't involved in school, and it was just a way of kind of getting him to open up, and it was pretty successful.
Anytime you talk about student data, you have to have the conversation about the demographics and what that data shows for a district. We've been talking about achievement scores, we've been talking about supports we're putting in place for kids. In order to make a lot of those decisions and understand some of the data that gets thrown at you, you need to have a pretty good picture of what your district looks like. So this is this year's current demographic status for the entire district. It's not a lot different than last year, for the most part. So what I did is I went back into the Illinois report card and went back as far as I could to give you some information of how we've changed. Some of these numbers are from 10 years ago, some are 6 years ago. It all depends on what was available online. For example, for white students, we're at 80% this year. 10 years ago, that was 92%. The African American students at 6%, that is doubled, actually more than doubled in the last 10 years. Hispanic students have more than doubled in the last 10 years. Asian students are up almost 3%, and multiracial students are up less than a percent from 10 years ago, so that didn't change a whole lot. Our free and reduced, as you might guess, is doubled, or nearly doubled in the last 10 years. Our IEP students, it didn't go all the way back to 10 years from the data I had online, but it's up 4% in the last 7 years. And I know at the high school we're experiencing a massive influx of IEPs. 504 is that there was no data online for that. I know that hasn't changed a whole lot. I think some of the younger levels, they're looking at some higher numbers in their 504 programs. In ELL, it was less than 1% 8 years ago, and now we're at 4%. And that is proven to be, I know at the high school level, it's proven to be a struggle. And the homeless is roughly the same. So I've been here 9 years, so, darn near 10, and this district has changed an awful lot in terms of demographics. And I think a lot of things you've heard already tonight, and some of the things you're going to hear a little bit later in regards to the things we're doing, the things we'd like to do, and so on, are a direct result of the changes that we're experiencing. It's not just about new and better ways of helping kids learn, but it's what you're being faced with every day, and sometimes you have to find ways to do things differently. There are things that force that versus a voluntary reaction to, hey, there's a better way to do this type of, the inquiry learning type thing that Tina shared. But sometimes the kids sitting in front of you have changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And you just can't keep doing things the same way. And so these are the types of things that are creating, and encouraging and forcing, and whatever word you want to use, for us to find better ways and more effective ways to not only help kids learn, but to support kids.
I know we talked quite a bit about park already, but we included not only in the slideshow, but also in our own frameworks, our results. And again, as we talked about, we can't compare from the previous year because they did not report it the same way for us, and it's also not the same test. However, we've given you, they have five different levels. And while they also have an extra column there explaining that those, the percentage of that were at a level 4 or above meet or exceeds, I think we also look at that level 3 as the approaching and how close those students are when we look at that. So we also are really looking at that level 3 as well when it comes to our students and how they are performing on this test.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, that was a change that went on with the implementation of policy prior to this year, because they did divide them up into 5 categories. And what they found was when the general public, when you look at scores, you tend to gravitate to meet and exceeds, because that was what we were inundated with prior to that NIGAP and ISAT. So anything below that, leads you to believe that it wasn't, sufficient. And so many states have changed that so that 3 is also contained within that score, so that approaching expectations doesn't have a negative connotation. It should have a positive connotation, and so it's important just to distinguish that.
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that a little bit, and right now we cannot compare our student scores to anything other than what was taken last year, and that is against the state scores. If you take a look at level 1 on anyone's, of course, what you want to be is have a lesser percentage in a level 1 than the state. But what I do want to point out, when you look at the state and you look at the district/school, that is not comparing apples to apples. Well, it never is, obviously, with school districts, but in the state, that is not comparing computer-based testing to computer-based testing. Within the state, there were multiple schools, and I don't know what the percentages, that took it paper pencil, which, talking to the elementaries, made a huge difference in some of the accomplishments when they took it paper pencil and how they felt. So in those state scores, there are paper pencil achievement scores in that, if that makes sense.
It does, and I'll make it available to you since we talked about it in this meeting. And that was, there was a report developed either by IPA, ISA, one of the organizations, that showed a distinguishable difference between those that took paper and pencil and those that took technology-based. So it was pretty significant.
Falling on one side, paper, pencil was
Paper,
higher?
pencil. Yeah.
How many districts took that, do you know?
I don't know offhand. I can get information to show you the difference, and I'll get that out to you. I'll push that out on Friday night.
But isn't it interesting though, as much as we all, in our heads, we're thinking we need to go tech,
Sure.
because tech is everything, that interestingly enough, they still do better with paper and pencil.
Well, and that's why I would love
Yeah, it does.
tablet
Question.
and Scribe.
No test should be impacted by the ability to manipulate a piece of equipment.
Exactly.
I thought we had to go tech. No, that was law.
We had so much time, and this year we had to, like, you had, it depends on your enrollment and your percentage of, I think it's also like by building and how your buildings are set up, and yeah, there's lots of different,
So we didn't have a choice?
we didn't have a choice this year.
It's based on your
We did-
capacity
This district
and your
didn't have a choice.
bandwidth
Right.
and everything else.
Yeah, we did the first year, which is what our elementary
Yeah.
went
Right.
with pencil.
So really what our teachers can do with this data, what we can do is really only look at hours. And if you are on the park site, you can really disaggregate questions and what they were asking and what the rate was of students that succeeded in those questions. We still cannot thumb through whether they struggled with that question due to the technological component. But for us to compare state to district, it, is a little bit false. That's not necessarily accurate. So what we can do is take a look at that disaggregated information and say, okay, so analysis is where it's at for us. 3 pieces of text, which is what happens on the computer. They must read 3 pieces of text, go back to the text and answer questions, analyze all 3 pieces of text. And so that's something that we need to do. We know we need to do that. So we don't just toss this out because, well, we're being compared to schools that get to paper pencil, because we can look at our specific.
But isn't that comment only relevant if the paper and pencil people are significant in the sample? I mean, it's like, I can see this, but if, the .05 level of significance, you have to kind of do the statistics on it. So, I mean, if I would basically say that the data would have to be looked at more closely, as you suggested, relative to the performance between state and district. But I do have a question about this. So I was trying to figure out basically trying to make the comparable map categories to the park. So is this correct in saying high, average, and high would be level 5, exceeded expectations? And so now you're saying met expectations and approached expectations is average then? Okay.
Many states had grouped 3s, 4s, and 5s, when originally it was just 4s and 5s.
Okay.
Because what they were saying was, wait a minute, how can approaching expectations have a negative connotation if you're seeing them advance towards those skill sets?
Yeah, but I'm trying to figure out the labels here versus up here.
Right.
So you would put, okay.
Yeah, I
But
know.
so with a grain of salt,
Sure.
but so is it your opinion that approach expectations is an appropriate inclusion?
I think it is, but I don't think that, we would all love to see that met expectations. I mean, that's our goal.
Okay.
Minimum meet expectations. But
Okay,
when you have someone approaching expectations, my thing is I think it's unreasonable to see that as a negative, as opposed to, it's different if it said, trying to approach, I don't know. But when approaching expectations, what I'm saying is yes, you want to see 4s and 5s, but it shouldn't count as a negative, shouldn't have a negative connotation for
Okay.
approaching.
And really, at this point, what we can do is take this data and set goals to move it over, to grow from here. So.
When we looked at ours, we definitely could see that it appears we need to do some work, and we are The math curriculum has changed. At the time, my understanding is with the curriculum, we weren't completely aligned with Common Core. So that's why Tracy Kimball really went to bat and said, we've got to get updated resources and so forth. The same is true with the science, because that will support what Elizabeth was saying about helping the students to learn how to analyze. And we don't want to just say text, but it's information. So whether we're looking at a primary resource or we're looking at a chart and we're interpreting results based on a chart, overall the students need to work on analyzing. The other thing that came to light for us, and we saw this more so in MAP, was vocabulary. And so we've had some really good conversations with the subject-oriented teachers, working with the language arts teachers, and especially with the special education teachers, to get ideas on how to teach vocabulary to our kids.
So are you saying the investment we made in the new textbooks should help drive these scores later down the road?
I do, yes. Also, we're starting a software program. It's called Alex, and that's going to be a great support system for our students that need support in math, because it will, when they get on the computer and work on the program, it will meet them at their level, and then slowly teach them with the help of the teacher doing small group work and so forth, but help to fill the gaps that they are missing so that they can continue to improve. And I think one thing that, Dr. Wood, you've shared this analogy many times before. Yes, we want to see the kids meeting or exceeding, but let's not forget about the student that maybe they are at level 1, but when we look at our maps, they improve by 10 points. That's huge. So I think we just always need to keep it in perspective, glean from it what we can, and continue to create goals and work towards them.
And I think it's important too, there's kids in the approach expectations that are doing the very best they can. And we don't want to make them feel inadequate, like failures, because they didn't get to the meet or they didn't get to this exam.
And that was a point, to your point, I just want to take a moment to share, because I think that is really important, because when we disaggregate data and we're really drilling down, and I wrote the state on this too, because I think it's a service. I was in a school district where we had 60% of our students had private tutors, 0% free and reduced. There were a lot of socioeconomic barriers that were removed. At the end of the day, I would stand up before the board, they put me in the paper and pat on the back, and we get gold apple awards. And I never got there were never any concerns when we had kids in the exceeds categories dropping 7 and 8 points per year because they were in the exceeds category. So we did more data mining research, and what I was able to find was that amongst our special needs, our tiered students and so forth, 81% of them were found to make statistically significant gains. Now the reason we get beat over the head with it is because they still stayed within the below in regards to achievement. They were making significant gains of 11 points, 21 points, 38 points. It could be from warning to below. And some of the best teaching that was going on was with our most neediest population, who according to the scores were not in the meets or exceeds, but were making more progress than any of our students, even the ones that were at the far end of the spectrum in the exceeds category. And I think that's something that, and we've talked about this at Kevin, is to look at that statistical significance and achievement as opposed to using met or exceeds as our barometer. Because there's no doubt when we look at scores, there are things we need to address. And the worst thing you can do is hide from scores. So we need to see what we can do to look at how we can make that statistically significant jump, but we have to apply that to all of our students.
So you're just saying it's easier to move the bottom than the top?
No,
Because there's
what I'm
no-
saying is the state would come and beat me over the head about students that were in the below category, and every school in the state would get beat over the head. And some of the best teaching that was going on was with our most significantly challenged students that had limitations cognitively, they just did. And yet, some of the best games we saw were with our students who were struggling and weren't being recognized for their leaps in achievement, as opposed to the other end, we were getting accolades for students in the exceeds category who were dropping 7 and 8 points every year. And the problem is that it wasn't with our teaching with our most challenging students. Our most impactful teaching was occurring at this end. So we're at the opposite end of the scale with our most advanced students. We were just accepting that they were advanced students and weren't challenging them to a greater degree. And as a result, their scores were dropping, but we were getting awards for that. I mean, so the score can't tell the whole picture, and that's why, if anything, we're really trying to look at each individual student, and we want to see, they're going to be in those subgroups, they're going to be in those tracks of students, so that we can gauge their progress as they go. That's why it's important to see when we have students that move into our school district, we want to see where they're at. We can't necessarily use that single score. Now, after we've had them and they're in our system, then we want to gauge how successful they've become. That's what's most relevant to us. So, and this is a desirable district, and so it's important to make sure we're gauging the success of those students, because some of these students who are coming into our school district that is attractive, they're coming here for the schools. And often, not always, but many times, these are students that have pretty significant deficits. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing everything we can to challenge it.
I can't remember the phrase that we used in special ed, where they make a gain that is, for them is a year's growth, may only be 2 months' growth for somebody else, but for them it's a year's growth. What is that called?
So it's the rate of improvement we look at? It's
That wasn't the phrase I was thinking, but,
We're always trying to get that catch-up growth.
yeah. And isn't
Close that
something on our teacher evaluation that we look at when we take a look at the achievement of the students in their class? That's factored into it? Am I?
So the student growth is a new component of the
Yes.
evaluation that is just being implemented this year.
But the
So
student
yes.
growth, is it impacted by the ability of a student
Individual
to,
goals are set.
Yeah, individual growth targets are set for
Right.
each student in the class.
so that is part of our teacher evaluation,
Absolutely, and that's new.
30% of their performance evaluation rating is student
Right.
growth.
which is good, because otherwise you would have teachers who would say, I do not want quote, low-achieving students in my class because they're not going to grow as much as somebody else, and therefore my evaluation will be less. You can't have that. You have to be, I can't think of the phrase, I will. I'll just shout it out in the middle of something.
It's rate of improvement, but I'll have to.
Well,
Yeah, it's here somewhere.
But also, then I think it takes away from, and years ago, you don't see this anymore. You really don't. But you used to see, many years ago, when class rosters were put together, those that were in the teachers have been there for a long time, were getting some pretty nice rosters of kids that were achieving at a high level, and the newbies were getting some of the more challenging cases. And so now there's a much more concerted balance in regards to rostering, which is a good thing.
Now, how is that done?
What's that?
How is the roster done? I was wondering.
Oh, there's a lot of variables. You look at the,
Yeah.
I mean, you really sit in there.
I mean, there's a whole process in place
Maybe that's-
where you have a class of kids come in
Sure.
and you determine which teacher that kid ends up.
There are
Because we always talk about
No,
that.
but you know what?
They're hand placed.
At the elementary.
Elementary, hand placed, bounce, classroom is so important.
I mean, so emotional plays a big role in
Yes.
it. Plays a huge role. Making sure that, if there was a student who had a significant issue with perhaps another student, that's not in the best interest to have them in the same situation. So we want to make sure that, we look at personalities of students. Who are teachers that might connect better with a particular student? And we don't always get it right. But I know that everyone around this table devotes a significant amount of time to making sure that those rosters are developed with the kids in mind. Absolutely.
So the new teacher that doesn't know anyone doesn't get stuck with a bunch
No.
of...
Right, every classroom is balanced.
And to that degree, when we talk about teachers,
Best we can.
I mean, that'd be a part of the evaluative
Best we can.
component. It's in there for administrators too.
It's when the move-ins come to the job.
Or kindergarten don't know where they're from.
Park at the high school was a struggle, to say the least, and we're doing what we can to try to take away bits and pieces of data that will help us identify hopefully some areas that might correlate to some other areas and other data that we have that shows where we need to improve. Our biggest issue was, it was not only a different test and the results were reported differently, we changed the grade level they tested at. We went from 11th grade the first year. When the state came out, it was 11th grade English and Algebra 2, which is mostly our juniors and some sophomores. And then much closer to the test, they said you could change it if you wanted to. Well, we'd already made plans, so we stayed at the junior level. But we wanted to have data that could help us early in the child's career. And so we moved it to the freshman level. And so we have 1 year of junior grade level students' data and 1 year of freshman level data. That's a different test, that's reported differently. And now we're not doing Park anymore at the high school level. So it was a lot of frustrating work to just find out that it's dumped. But we'll get what we can from it. We're moving to the SAT. In my mind, that was more of a money move for the state than anything else. But we'll see how it goes this year. It's going to be a one-day test, which is far better than trooping some kids. If you had a kid in Algebra 2 and English 3 2 years ago, they went into that testing center 6, 7, or 8 times.
Oh, gee.
And for more than sometimes 60 minutes. We're back to a single day SAT test where we'll test all the juniors at one time. It'll probably take 3 to 4 hours. And of course, we don't know what that report is going to look like. It's going to be our baseline data because we don't have any previous. But I do think we'll find it much more helpful data-wise than the Park. And we'll see what we can gather out of it.
So when you got the Park data back this year, say I'm a 9th grade student, and you've got to be able to glean something out of my test score. I'm assuming something, but what do you do with that then? Do you say, hey, Dwayne's not real good at math, we're gonna do what?
I think it's like we've been talking on, you take a look at other data points from other areas and to see, does that fit, or is that kind of an outlier based on that particular test? Because, we have all these, we rely a lot on common assessments within our departments and within common courses. And so you can take this information and maybe you can see that it matches up, that this is the type of thing this kid needs to work on, or, wow, that's just an outlier, that makes no sense to what we're doing here. And there'll be some of that.
Who does that?
The common course teachers will do that.
Okay, so my math teacher would look at my math. My history teacher would look at my, so does the counselor ever get involved where, hey,
Yes.
he's way good at English, how about we give him 2 hours of math instead of 1 and cut the English almost to nothing? Is there an overriding?
Well, we don't do that in high
Picture.
school level. We gotta get their requirements taken care of, so.
But if I can do the English without even going to class, wouldn't you want to help me with the math part where I'm failing? Or is there some big picture thing that we're doing with these students? Or is that something to think about for the future?
Well-
Focused study halls though, right?
Well, not so much anymore, but we have tutoring, math and science tutoring, and we can direct kids to go to that. We have our RTI team, our SST team, that looks at this data as well, and they look at it with counselors. And so, when they're going over a certain level of class, that counselor will be there, and that counselor can provide a lot of information, more so than some of the members on the team know, And they can make those kind of designations, well, yeah, math's not his strong point, but man, he's knocking it out over here in English. And then they get the English teacher, the math teacher involved for that particular child, and try to come up with a plan, whether that means tutoring or some type of extra help in the morning or what have you. But we're pretty tied in terms of what we tell them they can take based on requirements to graduate and so on. So, we can't do the double block English period and that kind of thing.
Can I ask you a question about that very issue here? I took the GHS plan from last year, and what your, what should I say, criteria for improvement, various or methodologies, I don't know the correct term. But, so looking at last year's, one of the things that you were trying to do was make the core curriculum a priority. And that certainly was the case. I saw that your core curriculum is very well supported. Students taking more than required core classes. Okay, that was what you were trying to do. But I guess, so you were very successful in that. Actually, you've been very successful for quite a while. So I guess my question is, can you explain how that methodology and many of those points led to really what I consider a pretty significant gap between what was your goal to increase by 2%, so that would be up to 40%, down to 34 for those students, basically college readiness in all 4 subjects. So I guess my question is, having looked at the data from 2015 and 2016, I didn't really see any, well, I saw one, I think maybe there was one difference that you gave. So I guess I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Susan, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what the question is.
Okay, well, basically the question is, you said you would, I'm just gonna be flat out blunt. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, carrying over these criteria from last year to this year really didn't help. Why? Because these criteria did not improve your scores from 2015 to 2016. Yet, you did what you said you were going to do. I just don't think having counselors talk about taking more than, I'm saying, look, you did a great job telling all these students to take more than the required number of courses, but the results aren't better, they're worse.
Which results are you talking about?
The ACT college readiness benchmark, they're worse. So I don't think that that's a relevant criteria anymore. I mean, here's why. I guess ACT, I get your reservations about Park, I get that, fine. But I'm most concerned about from 2012 to 2016, pretty much across the board for English, math, reading, and science. There's been a decline from 2012 to 2016. Do you have any ideas why this has occurred?
Yeah, I do.
And what would they be?
Well, first of all, I showed the demographic slide. Our demographic has changed tremendously. Also, since 2012, my staff has been reduced by about 13 teachers. My class sizes have gone up I have many classes well over 30. I think all those impact. Now, is there one single thing? No, I don't think so. You know, it's,
Like, so are some of your, like, English, math, reading, and science, for example, are some of your science classes over 30?
no. We hold those for safety reasons.
Reading is over 30?
Well, that's the ELA classes, the English Language Arts classes.
And are they over 30?
Oh, yeah, many of them are.
Wow. I mean, this is, so I guess one of my questions is, the class sizes have been set for next year. I mean, the staffing,
No.
no, I mean,
No.
for the second semester?
Second semester, yes.
That's what I mean, second semester. Okay, they're set for second semester,
Right.
so, you know, your hands are tied in that regard, but do you, have you discussed with your instructional team maybe what possibilities there are for second semester changes?
We have a little bit. We're very limited on what we can do because we have the staff we have. We're not gonna, that's not gonna change. We're still gonna have, and I can provide that data if you need it, we're still gonna have numerous classes at 30 or more. The English teachers have reduced the amount of writing they have. Just the feasibility of grading it all and doing it effectively with that many kids. So that's gonna, I don't see that changing much at all in the second semester.
Right. Well, I guess one of the questions that I would find very interesting, and I mean, I would appreciate the data, and, you know, I'm just asking the question. That's all I'm asking, because I know your hands are tied on, you know, many matters, like you can't change the number of students in your classroom for second semester. But the question that I had looking at this is, for this ACT college readiness for all four subject areas, and it was, for 2016, it was 34%. So I took 34% of 349, which is about what the seniors were last year, which is 118 kids. Okay, if I backed out the AP kids, how many non-AP kids meet all four courses? Because it's a realistic assumption. I mean, you know, okay, we don't have to go through look at every kid, but, you know, your AP program looks to be blossoming, etc. So I would like to know what percentage of non-AP kids can meet all four subjects.
Okay.
And I think that would be a valid, I think that's valid data mining, but it wouldn't be fair to be a comparable comparison to other districts unless they were to do the same.
No, I don't
Yeah.
care about that.
You're just talking about the.
I don't care
Right,
about
right.
that. I only care about us.
Right.
That's all I care about.
What page are you looking at, Susan?
It's this Glenwood
Demographic
High
data,
School.
It would be page 2 of the,
No, it's performance data.
So right in the middle of the page,
Yeah, it says
the
performance data.
five-year trend in the college readiness?
Oh, yeah, okay. Here. Performance data, ACT college readiness.
So like over in column 4 where it says all four,
Yeah, 34.
GHS went from 37, 37, 39, 38, and then we had one bad year?
Well, you may, okay, what I see there is, well, I see you started at 37, and that sounds good, then you went up, okay. Then you see a decline, that upward, that upward.
39?
Well, then it's 38.
But that's not significantly.
But 38's above 237s.
It's not statistically
Well,
sufficient.
Well, I think,
So we need to
think
draw
part
a
of it is,
regression line.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's why there's such a focus on trend data. You know, because you can't compare a group of kids to the next year's group of same grade kids. You just can't do that.
Right, but this is all based off ACT. What was the year we had a class that just knocked the socks off?
2010 or 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2011, I saw it.
Yeah, so did we have 2016 where we just had a bad class?
And that's the thing, it's different classes.
It is.
It's not comparing the same kids out there.
Right, so,
It very well, now I would say,
You'd have to track the same
if you saw,
Yes.
if you saw that trend continue, or you even look back to see what was the trend data prior to that of student achievement, I mean, you could look at those things. But to your point, can you have a group of kids that tank, don't do as well?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. You can.
or excel to the point where they're just off the chart.
Right, well, I think we've got to, because now, you could also, since then, we've had a reduction in teachers and staff. We've had a reduction in some of our instructional coaches. We didn't have an assistant sup for a few years. I mean, there are variables that contribute to that, but I think at the end of the day, that's why I say any one data point is hard to, it can concern you. I agree, because when I look at data and I just look at it first and think, we dropped. Now, next year, if you saw that trend continue, then that would be concerning. But I will say, because there are other variables, whether that be demographics, and when we talk about demographics, the cornerstone to that is socioeconomics.
Right.
It crosses all ethnic and racial barriers and so forth, and so we are seeing an increase.
So
Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention to that,
Right.
but, and that's why I say, there's a difference between an excuse and a reason. I never want to stand back and excuse data.
Right. So let's look at the 3 charts on social emotional data here on the next page where the number of threat assessments has gone up considerably, the number of IEPs has gone up considerably.
Yeah, I mean,
And then
those,
throw in the class size and throw in,
and those do play a role, but I will say, it's certainly worthy to pay attention to that data point to see how we can address the needs, because I think going into the second semester, I would say that any administrator would go, okay, hey, we have these scores, what is it that we can adjust or do differently? Because we can even mine down more into the specific students
That's right.
that contributed to those scores falling. So,
Well, that's exactly what we're doing, like at the elementary, is the second grade, it very much showed up after 3 years, in our curriculum, that our kids, significant drop in our kids in tier 1.
I saw that.
We have to look at, like you said, it's a difference between an excuse and a reason, but we gotta start really filtering through, what is that? When you have 25 kids in the classroom, you've got all these interventions, there's only so much you can do. Those aren't excuses, that's the reality of it. But we still have the excellent teaching, the professional learning communities, it's amazing what we're still doing and looking at it. Teachers don't, we had a meeting tonight looking at it, there was nobody making an excuse. What you saw was, what are we gonna do? How do we work smarter with this? How are we gonna do more interventions? How can we divide and conquer these needs? But there do become limits.
So like on Susan's page, the English one, I'd say your regression line would slope down on that fairly good. But is that because of our English language learners that aren't learning English or something? Is there a reason?
is that a contributing factor? Yes.
That's small, I'd say,
That's
but-
very small,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the other thing I always think about when we look at all these things, and I was a test guy my entire life. I was the one that took the tests and tried to get better scores every time. But society's changed. We're sitting here grading ourselves on our kids' performance on these exams, and some kids aren't gonna go to college. Some kid's gonna be the most fantastic welder out there, make tons of money doing it. And what he scored on his ACT has nothing to do with his success in life.
That's right.
And so, to some degree, I'm wondering, maybe what are we doing on the outlying stuff to also help develop our students in different ways, not just from our test scores.
Do we do that? Do we have like different tracks for these kids? I mean, like if you use the European model, like the German model, they figure out which kids are on the college track, which kids are on the VOTEC track. I don't know if we do that in our school.
No, you don't. I mean, you don't track to that extent. Do you have students that gravitate towards more challenging coursework? Absolutely. And it's not considered tracking, but if you're in an honors math class, there's a strong likelihood that those students will be in an honors science or language class. Not all the time, because, that whole left-right brain thing, but it certainly does happen. So, and you need to be careful on the comparison with other countries. You really do. It provides some wonderful data, but they
Comparing
really...
Germany to Europe is, I mean, that's.
No, I get you, but
There are a lot of...
I do like the German model, I do.
Well, for example, the British model, for example, many African nations are models, the British model of school governance, for example. A good friend of mine from in a lot of different countries, but from Ghana, and they, at 12 years old, you're given a test. You do well on the test, you're going to college. You don't do well on the test, guess what? Now, not saying that going on one track or the other isn't going to bode well for that particular student, but no, we don't follow that model because in the United States, because there's so many different variables and comparative variables that other countries don't even take into consideration. It's not even apples and oranges, it's apples and mango or something.
Yeah, but when you consider what Brandon said, I mean, there are going to be a lot of our kids that don't go to college.
Absolutely.
They're going to do regular things.
No,
So are there regular things that they can learn that will help them have a better future other than?
When I don't even mean looking at it as a regular thing. I mean, when kids don't do well on the ACT, sometimes they're looked at as failures. Well, they're not a failure, that's just
Right,
not their
right.
bag. So, their excellent thing might be welding, or, whatever. So there's gotta be a way to foster them all from every angle.
What you're seeing is you're seeing a resurgence of vocational programs.
That's what I'm asking.
That's what you're really seeing here. A lot of schools were going away from that, particularly with technology. Well, what we're finding now is we're lacking builders and welders and a lot of these skill set who are going out and making a wonderful living. So you're seeing a resurgence of the vocational programs, even two-year college, studies are coming out left and right about, for particular majors, there's no need for a four-year college. You get a two-year degree, and these kids are leaving these two-year programs and going out, or these technical colleges, and going out and making a tremendous living. Now, that's not for everyone, and quite frankly, not every vocation would withstand that. They need to go 4, 5, 6, 12 years of college. So it's creating a learning environment to where we have opportunities for kids. So those kids that are going to be, that quote-unquote rocket science, we prepare them well to go down that path. They're doctors or lawyers, dentists, I guess.
Yeah.
Or if they're going to go down the vocational track, to have skill sets to become welders, that's wonderful. But that's certainly something we need to pay attention to.
I totally agree. I mean, the only reason why I focused on this was it was provided in our, summary, but it would be nice to know how those how we support those other kids, because it is true what you say, you can't compare the state's, view of vocational work, but in Europe, whether you go to college or whether you are basically off towards a trade. They're both very well respected in Germany. And I don't think that's necessarily the case in the US. I mean, I might be wrong, but, you know, in Germany, it's
I
very
agree,
well.
and picking back off of what you're saying, I think we need to really be careful on the kids who are doing the very best they can.
Right.
And not make them feel like failures. And that, what correlates exactly to that are the teachers who are teaching those kids, who are doing the very, very best they can, but they are not going to be the ones that score at the top. And we can't make the teachers feel like all of their kids have to score at the top. What we need to facilitate is an environment where everybody reaches their full potential, whatever that potential is.
Absolutely, Linda, because if you
And
ask
facilitate the
me,
teachers to do that.
if you asked me to wire a house, you'd be talking to a dead electrician in about 6 hours. You know, there are skill sets, and that's what it is. You have kids and individuals that have skill sets that they're going to be tremendously successful. And so what are we doing to help support and foster that?
Well, and we are a very high achieving community,
Absolutely.
which I think says we need to make sure that we foster the fact that everybody needs to do their very best. And that may not be the same in everybody's eyes as far as achievement.
So how are we identifying that then? What their bag is, or what their niche, or how they're wired?
You form relationships with the kids. That's the first thing you have to do as a teacher is form relationships with the kids and find what motivates that kid. And with this, I mean, every single kid is different. I can speak from my own experience, Steve. You know my son Carson.
Don't get me started.
Great kid, but you would look down the hallway, you see the messiest locker papers sticking out. There's Carson Wood's locker. And, you know, he had a high school teacher say, oh, he'll never go to college. He's working at Memorial, making more money than, and he's going into nursing because he found his niche. And
So how we have to identify
Well, they're
that
in
we have to.
There are different ways,
yeah, we
there's
do.
inventories you can do.
Get to know the kids, find out, and you can even use the scores with the map and the park to see where a particular kid is excelling. You might see that a kid that sits quietly in class every day doesn't do homework because the family life at home just doesn't necessarily encourage that, but he or she's got a gift in math. So then you find a way to work with that student. But I think it's really important, and it's just like what Susan said, it's American society has placed a lot of pressure on these kids. And it's concerning when you have parents that become upset when their kid gets a B. It's like, it's okay.
Well, there's an old saying that the A students work for the B students at a company owned by the C students. So you all laugh about it.
But that's pretty, I mean, we got PhDs
Can't really
living in
argue
their
it.
parents' basements.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so here, I think what Susan's asking and Steve's asking, and I asked it earlier, what is our structured plan? Because I just remember in my high school, there was a counselor sitting over there in his office every day, never left. If I walked in there, he would help me. But if I never walked in there, I got no help. And these kids don't have personalities like me where I'm not afraid to go in there. They're scared to death to go in the counselor's office.
So they don't know what they don't know.
So I think that's what we're asking is what is our structured, every student has to meet with a counselor every semester or whatever it is. I think we're struggling to get our hands around something that is what I'm getting.
Well, I can't speak for the schools specifically, because it hasn't, but it's being proactive about it, making sure that we're meeting with students, we're doing the inventories, we're helping direct these students, because, you know, for me, and I think many of us around the table, we help direct our children towards, you know, majors or different things that they want to do, but there are a lot of students who don't have that direction. And so that's what's more concerning to me, is that we're having some forethought in regards to helping direct these students who might not have advocates for them, so to speak, to help make those decisions. And there are skill set inventories, and again, I'm not going to speak to certainly what goes on at the high school and middle school, but they have skill inventories that go back to middle school to begin helping direct students in regards to their academic or vocational path, so to speak.
I guess that I'm not trying to make money.
Oh,
You know that.
you just pick away.
Okay, I'll pick it. But I just, like, if we have counselors, their only job is counseling, and they haven't spoken with every single student about, because
I'll bet you.
I'm picking on you,
Our
but-
counselors have met with every single student. They're in
Okay.
the lunchrooms every day. They are in Kid Day every Thursday, working with kids. A lot of times, parents will not get phone calls until after 5 p.m. because those counselors have been working with students
Okay.
every day. Now, would I like more counselors? Sure. Would I like more teachers? Sure. But we are doing the very best that we can, and the kids are too, with what we have.
And
so when you said we form relationships with them.
Yes.
Define, I guess what I'm asking for is define that.
Okay.
We have, and then, not right now.
Okay, sorry.
I'm just saying, I come to this meeting wondering, what are we doing? And we keep, all of us are asking, what are we doing? And I'm not getting any meat.
Come to the school. I'm serious. Would you just come, and I want you to see what's happening, because if I had the teachers that these kids have now, I mean, I loved school, and these teachers are phenomenal. Come visit.
Yeah, I guess I'm struggling with your question. When I see what goes in my building every day with counselors, social workers, staff workers, teachers, I don't know that I explained to you, you're not getting any meat, but damn, there's meat.
Okay.
These people
That's-
are working
maybe
their
just explain it
tails
then.
off.
Just explain it then, that's all we're saying.
There's nothing systematic, can I
Right.
speak for you, Jim?
It's not.
I'm so sorry. But if we were to give you some systematic plan, then we really are failing, because every single student that walks through the door needs their own, it's exactly what our vision says, individualized
that's
plan.
fair.
Every year, I know that most buildings do the same thing, but we host some student workers from the high school. And today, a student walked up to me and said, I just got booted out of my foster home, where do I go? And this is not for effect, this is because then he said, I have been in contact with Mrs. Countryman and, tell me,
Mrs. Scott.
Yes, Mrs. Scott, and worked with them all day to help me focus on what I need to do. And you know what that boy was wearing today? I'm a senior graduating in 2007, no. 2000, you want meat? This boy is one example of, I can't tell you how many that individualized support is given. But if we were to give you some systematic, because we all have student success teams, but every single one of those moments comes out with a different individualized plan. And this boy that happens to work in our building, and I am a true testament of how they help him, support him, and they are telling him, you must do this when you leave this school, because he has nothing else. Nothing. Giving him a path.
So none of them are getting skipped necessarily. I just go back to my example, I know how it was in real life. I was scared to death. I know that shocks you. But I was, as a little kid, I was scared to death to talk to an adult. And I was missed. So are the kids in the middle being missed? Because,
And when,
I'm just
no,
asking.
No, I agree with you. And I think that when, man, that was a long time ago. Huh?
it was.
But, no, but what I would say to that is there's been, and not that we're perfect or any school's perfect, but what I will say is because of the social emotional component, particularly with the onset of the attention given to bullying and a lot of those social events that a lot of kids are dealing with, there's been a much greater emphasis. That's why it always makes me laugh when the state sends a form that says check a box, like, you know, what percentage of parents have you made phone calls with this year, you know, what a silly thing. What I want to know, I'd rather have them ask me, how many students have you made, you know, a connection with, or have, you know, that, a teacher advocate, you know, 10 teachers assigned, or 10 students assigned to 10 or 15 of your kids. You know, it's those types of things, because I think it's a valid point. And are there kids who will slip through the crack? There are, unfortunately. But I will tell you, regardless of the school system that I've worked with or been a part of, there's a huge emphasis on trying to make connections with kids. And we're not always successful. Sometimes you just, I've had parents say, I don't want anybody talking to my kid. You know, we've tried to set up mentors, no. And if you do, I want to be present. I mean, unfortunately, there's something that has happened in that parent's life that is blocking us from making a connection with that student. So, it happens.
Well, maybe as a board, we need to look at our staffing issues at the high school. because the high school really was hit hardest, I think,
Sure was.
by the cuts.
Yeah, and is it counselors or is it teachers?
Is it counselors,
or
is it teachers, yeah.
You know, what is it?
Yeah, our budget's better, and I fall on the side of I'd rather provide the teachers than the bank account.
Class
No,
sizes
I-
are big across the
that's-
board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say the
If
high
you have
school.
26 kids in first grade.
We've got
Yeah.
over 30 in all, and the majority of the classes, science included. I mean, and this is not just middle school, it's like what Kim was saying, it's across the board. And we had to do what we had to do,
Right.
but now,
If we're to
if
live.
we're,
Well, we're seeing recovery,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we've gotten some things, and that's part of the plan is, you can't spend what you don't have.
Right.
So you have to make sure that, we're getting to a better point. And that involves looking at the programs that we have. If we don't have enough students committed to a particular course or whatever, we can't have it, and not that we do, but we can't have a class of, 8 to 1 or 3 to 1 or even 11 to 1. Maybe we need to look at how we can consolidate or provide something different so that we can maximize our human resource, but also commit dollars where they're needed. I mean, it was much like in my estimate when I looked at residency. We talked about, boy, let's look at our boundaries, let's look at this, well, have we done a checklist to make sure that everybody we have in our doors is actually living within our district? Because if you were to go, because when we looked at it, although we had, I think, 247 new families to our district, we declined 47 students in our district. So that meant we did an inventory of those who attend our schools, and rather than committing those extra dollars to students who don't attend. So I think we need to look at the same thing in the classrooms as well.
well, and like Dr. Wood was saying, I mean, you all can't do everything within a year. The one thing that's been helpful to us, we got an assistant superintendent, that was huge. You let us keep our instructional coaches. I'm thinking elementary probably needs some reading. That might be more important than getting other classroom teachers. I mean, I don't know, that's definitely conversations that we'd have in the future, but you're doing what you could do to help support us.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
based off what we've been just talking about, and Liz, I think, kind of hit on it. We all want to make our kids successful. They're all different. So how are we determining what each one's success is? Is it being out in the real world and making a decent living? Is it just being able to graduate? I mean, because we're wanting to put them out long-term. So what is our definition of success?
I mean, it's hard to, if you want to put a parameter around it, I mean, it's, providing them with as great a skill set as possible to have opportunity, because that's what it's all about.
From the time they leave here until
From the time they leave here, we
they
want
could
them-
potentially retire.
I mean, we want them leaving here with a good, solid foundation, reading, writing, math, an understanding of
Wellness.
social studies and sciences, and, I mean, everything. Social emotional development, making sure they have compassion and understanding for other students and coworkers and everything else. So, I mean, there's a variety of things and ways we can define it, but I think it's doing an inventory on that as well, because that can't stay stagnant. We're in an ever-changing society, so to the degree we look at our staffing patterns, we also have to look at our curriculum patterns and our offerings, because that's going to change. We need to manipulate it. And we also need to respond to our population. And one of the things that we're doing right now is we have a diversity committee that is up and running off the ground. And it's a very important committee for this community to have. We're seeing an influx of a very diverse population. The diversity, as we went through, has a huge, it's not about race, it's not about special needs, it's not about gender, it's about all of those things. And so, we talked about not just attracting, we had a conversation about, they said, go out and recruit. Well, we can go out and recruit individuals, but I'd rather attract individuals. I'd rather have them say, I don't want to come to you and say, I want you to come here. I want you to say, I want to be a part of that school district. How do I get in those doors? And so we're developing a framework for that. So I think we need to approach each of those things in a very similar manner.
And Steve, think back 2 years ago when the board developed their goals. We were all a part of that, for those of us that were here. There was several evenings that we met to really massage the achievement goal, the resources goal, the community goal. That's where we need to start. We keep talking about the strategic plan. We need to go back to that beginning, identify our mission and our vision, your backwards design, talking about how we define success, and then everything funnels within that.
But aren't we all here, back to what Dr. Wood just said a little while ago, everybody just wants to be out in the real world making a decent living. So is that success?
It is.
And being a good citizen.
Well, and if you, I don't know if you want to go back to the original document, but if you go to the slide towards the end where it says supports for struggling students, those are all the things that we are doing. Keep going.
Slide 17.
All those supports.
I did have a pre-planned. I do appreciate all the things that.
Thank you.
I did have.
Visit the middle school.
Okay, if you insist.
Your excuse.
Thank you, Steve. So moved, or whatever.
We'll finish the work.
So here are our supports to define success. And it isn't going to be success for every child. What I think Steve is saying is not a number or a test score.
No.
I mean, that's really our big aha right now. I mean, we can keep looking numbers. Yes, it's one facet of success, one facet, which is why we've made a movement to include the social emotional data in our plans, because a lot of schools just report on their behavior data. That's not important to us. The complete picture of the whole child is what's important to us.
There's so much of what we do now, it's unbelievable.
So when they leave these doors of these buildings, when they're at graduate as a senior, they need to know what they're gonna do or what they'd like to do the rest of their life, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And have the
The
skills.
rest of their life.
Yes, to do it, or at least manage their way to do it.
Not the rest of their life.
Well, or at least through their working
Well, I think-
years,
Some direction.
I think you need to provide them with the tools to be able to say,
whether it's a career or college or, and if it's
Well,
not,
our mentality, I feel, has been, well, I can't go to college, so I'm gonna go to vocational school. It should be, I love that. Math isn't my thing, so what is there available for me to excel in this as young as a freshman in high school? Versus it being this is what you do when you're not doing so hot over here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
yeah, but the world needs people to build buildings and put computers together and build equipment and cars and all this stuff too.
if you were to look up on there and I just had just the acronym as opposed to what it said, check in, check out. I mean, how many board members, I don't mean, but how many know what check in, check out is? Okay.
Only because
I do now.
substituted.
But what I'm saying is, check in, check out might be something that you just check in and check out in your mind and don't think about it, but there is a lot that goes into check in and check out. That's when those relationships are about. That's when the mentor's involved in their life. They're checking to make sure their homework's done. They're making, it's kind of a wellness piece to their education. That outside of that, the regular person just doesn't know and understand.
Right, but I understand the relationships, but
Yeah.
what if we asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you think your life's
I
gonna look like when you?
I hope that
Or what do
in
you think your
sixth
life's-
grade, they say, I don't know.
Well, that's fine, but then the next conversation, maybe they'll start thinking about it.
Right, but then by the time 8th, 9th grade, you know what? I really like math.
Okay,
And I really think that, they start to identify, and that's where these inventories come in, because it does become, it's overwhelming almost. So these inventories then begin to help focus and direct. And I do believe that we will be in a day and age to where, much like college courses, I think school districts from perhaps middle school on will begin to really set students on a path that inventories have identified their strengths are.
right, because when they enter college, they pretty much have narrowed it down. Whether
Or
the school
go to college
did it or
and drop
they,
out,
well,
Or change major.
or change majors 5 times, that's what we're hoping to avoid
Yeah.
too. When they get to that, I want them to change their mind a bunch when they're in the 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade. I want to be a doctor, I want to be an athlete, I want to be a a dentist, I want to be a teacher, whatever the case might be.
But we're having them conversations with them now?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
even in.
But we want them to refine instead.
That what they want to do when they grow up? Or what they want to be?
Study
People
in
come in
college.
to
I mean,
ask
I'm
them.
one of those people.
I don't
I
think-
changed and, you know.
But I think it helps to have better ideas, so you're not changing majors all the time.
Hey, you're
But you-
looking at
But
somebody.
maybe you will, yeah, I know.
But at the same time, what you get in school doesn't, what you do in, there were 4 students going to med school that could have walked into a closed sliding glass door.
Yeah.
So unless you test drive it, you're not gonna know whether it's for you. So just because you're a 4.0 student and you're on track for medical school doesn't mean you should be a physician.
It doesn't define who you are.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So, I mean, even having the conversations, if we don't have a way for them to kind of stick their toe in the water, then we can't really.
Who was identified as one of the most brilliant, his IQ was like 236, phenomenal, off the charts. Believe it or not, he was a farmer.
Believe it or not.
No, there's a gentleman out there that is a farmer, Steve.
Yes.
Well, to that point, if somebody saw his eye, they wouldn't think he would necessarily be a farmer or anything. They would think, oh, he's an astrophysicist or some scientist or, no. He's one of the most brilliant men in the world, and it's just, to your point, you don't, just because your IQ can't define what vocation you're going to go in. That's why you have to create opportunity. You have to say, to your point, I mean, when you're going out there, we can only provide them with the skill sets that they need to test the waters and to be at least have a knowledge and understanding of what they're going to pursue.
Right, and it's okay to fail, like
And
you
it's,
said.
well, it is okay to fail, and that's something that we have to remove that we've talked about. As soon as we can get people to be comfortable with failing, that's kind of nirvana, But we're so consumed by grade scales and test scores that we have kids that are afraid, parents that are afraid, and now we've tied it to teacher evaluations.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't be held accountable. We should. Absolutely. But don't think that it doesn't, it creates, competition is good. But how likely might you be to share some of your trade secrets if you know that potentially that could be used against you when you're looking at a formative assessment type kind of scenario? I'm not now. From my standpoint, bring it on, let's compete. I'm good with it. But not everybody is set up that way. Our system has been set up over many, many years of time, and we need to shift the way in which we think, and one of the ways in which we do that is to say, it's okay to fail.
Because sometimes the person who is impacted most by that competition is the child, who
Absolutely.
has no control over it.
Right. But you're right.
And, I agree with this idea. I mean, the lessons, the moments where, something happened and I guess the word fail occurs. Well, you think back about that. But my question is, failure is a very hard concept to keep your confidence up. So when you say the best lesson is to teach students that failure is okay, well, I would say yes, but then what's your support net?
Not trends of failure. There's a difference between failure and trends of failure. You start to see a trend of failure, and then you have a concern.
Okay.
I mean, you've got to monitor them. Hopefully you have mentors and people who are going to direct you in your life. Absolutely. I think one of the worst things we've done in terms of promoting intrinsic motivation in students is, our advocacy of student of the day and patting everybody on the back and giving trophies and awards. The most significant development of intrinsic motivation is accomplishing something of significance, of which much of that is done through trial and error and failure. And we discourage that. So we falsify how we develop intrinsic motivation by handing out awards and hanging their picture on the wall. So we've got to move, but that's a cultural piece that has to change within a learning environment, because I want to build intrinsic motivation through accomplishing things and achievement.
I think one of the greatest things we can do is create an environment where children and teachers and parents take risks.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
need to create an environment where that's okay, that's encouraged. There's this amazing person in this room who gave me this lesson on growth, when growth occurs. She's gonna be really mad at me right now, but that's okay. But she's sitting up there. So think of it like a rubber band. Have you seen this analogy before?
No.
No, so.
Not the
I
rubber
don't-
band on your wrist.
Yeah, I usually have one on.
Oh, okay, yeah, I
Okay,
know
because
that.
she taught me this.
I know.
So I-
car, do you need me to go get
Yes, I can't take any credit for it. This is from Amy. But you know, when we're all comfortable and that rubber band isn't stretched out, do you see any growth in that band at all? It's not until we actually grow and take that chance to when the learning occurs. So that has to happen. We have to create an environment where we take risks. We have to have the conversation like we're having tonight, where we're not afraid of data, that we embrace it, that we talk about what more can we do. And you asked about, oh, he's not here, the meat, the system. I'm going to tell you right now, you have a team that is about what more can we do. And so together, we're working with our staffs and with the resources that we have before us to figure out what can we do for our kids, what can we do for our families, what resources do we need, how are we going to get them? And we ask from you that you keep asking us these great questions that you are and committing more resources and say, we support you, go get it done. Tell us what you need and get it done. That's what I think is exciting. I know it's been a long conversation, we've gone through a lot of data and all these great things that we're doing, but to me, that's what it comes down to, is as a team, what more can we do for our kids?
I do, but absolutely, and everybody works 100%, and I think you bring up some valid points. I do, Susan, because you're very analytical, and you dig into data, and you're a data person, and it's good to pull that out and extract it out, because I can guarantee you that if you have that question, there are others that have that question. I think we have a responsibility to educate our public as well, because I think there are things that we learn in these conversations that we wouldn't otherwise, and it's one of those things to where people will continue to go on in ignorance about something that they just don't know about. And so I think it's important to define that, address those needs, and educate our public, because we do. These administrators in here work hard, our teachers work hard, and I love this conversation. I just need to be quiet more.
I would like to say one thing in that regard, and that was, I did have a wonderful learning experience last week when I learned really what the role of the instructional coach was within the district, because I had no idea. And it was a very illuminating 3.5-hour conversation, and
3.5 hours. We were up there at 3.5 hours.
no, 2.5.
I tried to keep it to 1.5. 2.5.
You could have said enough.
No, they have great things. You need to
I
learn
know.
from them. They
Exactly.
are amazing.
Exactly, but I will testify that really that is the case. I mean, Amy and Corey are always thinking, you know, their wheels are always
Maybe just
turning.
work a little harder, you know?
Oh my goodness.
Just stretch a little bit more.
And then let it go with other intended.
Anyways,
They're phenomenal.
and may I just make one comment? I thought the elementary school reports were really marvelous because you could just follow the data along. Each of the elementary schools did this. I mean, not to compare across schools, but you could just follow it. It was just so great saying, okay, here's A, and I have to take A down here. It's too hard for me. But I tried.
Could you feel the consistency and the teamwork
Yes.
between the three elementaries?
Yes.
I thought that was
Well,
pretty evident.
yeah, but you know, it's always good to have something that's, you know, easy to follow, whatever. So, that was
Well,
great.
we luckily have the children for 5 years.
Yes.
That's very
That's
true.
true.
That's very true.
That's a huge
When
difference.
I used to be at GIS as a principal and you only had 2 years, I mean, it was hard. I mean, you just barely get to know them and then you're giving them away. So,
Yeah, but here's what I did. I took last year's GIS and
you
I
like the cold.
added it to, I mean, I did sort of trend it, but as, I'm not to be, I think that's the kind of thing that you know, the consistency, it's very time consuming, but you could kind of trend from GIS to PMS. Oh, it's good. See, like this. I took last year's and then I trended in some of the data myself, so I appreciate that. I'm probably the only one who.
Brenda did it.
Our teachers need to see it that way.
Well, I meant to, I didn't look at a single thing before tonight, because, you guys amaze me every day. When I go sit at ball, I have a ball at ball. I don't know, and I'm proud of this place, so it's pretty darn impressive. I already know that, I don't need the numbers.
See, I don't have children in the district anymore, so it's a compliment between you and me. I mean, compliment, you know, COMPLEMENT.
Now, I just want to thank everybody for all their hard work, and that includes board members. Thank you very much for going through the data and sharing questions, and hopefully help answer some questions. We do have one more thing on
I
that.
think that's big action on this.
Yeah.
Don't they?
We gotta approve this, right? Brandon,
So moved.
you got a motion? Do I have a second to approve the SIP plans?
Second.
Nancy,
Maddox?
please.
Yes.
Siren? Oh, wait, you're gone. Worley?
Yes.
Yurovich?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Cop?
Yes. Principals, thank you very much.
Well, we have one
Another
more.
agenda item.
We have one more agenda
Just one
item.
more for the. Give it a
Or two? I want to thank them again. They do a good job. We have an employment of a full-time office, one secretary at GHS. Do I have a motion to approve that? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, Betsy, please.
Yep. Worley?
Yes.
Yurovich?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Maddox?
Yes.
Cop?
Yes. Moving on to communications. Anybody want to address the school board on any agenda or any topic whatsoever?
I dare you. I just dare you.
All right, hearing none, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thanks. Second?
Second.
Thank you. We're adjourned. See you. Night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.